All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. Today we're going to look at a very specific formula from the world of data analysis.
Okay.
Specifically Power Query.
All right.
And it's a function that even if you are familiar with Power Query, you may have overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
But one that can be absolutely critical when you're working with data that comes from different sources.
Yeah.
And that is DateTime.AddZone.
Uh-huh.
Now you may think, okay, that sounds really specific. Why would I need to add a time zone? I think I know what time it is.
Right.
But when you're working with data, especially across, different servers, different databases,
Right.
different regions even,
Yeah.
time zones can really trip you up if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So let's dive into this function and really understand why it's so important.
Okay. Sounds good.
Now, the formula itself looks a little something like this.
Right.
DateTime.AddZone. Datetime is nullable datetime. Time zone hours is number. Optional time zone minutes as nullable number. As nullable date time zone.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. But if we break it down,
Okay.
it's actually pretty straightforward.
All right.
So the first part, date time as nullable date time.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically saying, hey, we're working with a date and a time here.
Right. Okay.
It could be anything, could be a timestamp from a log file,
Mm-hmm.
could be, a date that something that was entered into a database.
Right.
It's just saying, this is our starting point. This is the date and time we're dealing with.
Gotcha.
Then we've got time zone hours as number.
Okay.
That's where we say, okay, how many hours do we need to shift this by
Right.
to get it into the correct time zone?
Okay.
And then we have this optional time zone minutes,
Yeah.
which sometimes you need that extra level of precision if you're dealing with a time zone that's not a whole number of hours off from UTC.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the output of all of this is what's called a date time zone.
All right. Date time zone.
And I think that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because a date time zone is not just a point in time.
Right.
It's a point in time with context.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It tells you where in the world that time exists.
Got it.
So, if I just say 3 p.m.,
Mm-hmm.
that could mean 3 p.m. anywhere.
Yeah. Anywhere in the world.
But if I say 3 p.m. in Sydney, Australia,
Oh, okay. I get it.
now we have a date time zone.
So it's not just the time, it's the time and the location.
Exactly.
I got it. That makes sense.
And this is where things can get really messy if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah.
Because let's say you're analyzing website traffic
Okay.
and you see a huge spike in traffic at midnight.
Right.
But midnight where?
Right.
Midnight in London is very different from midnight in Los Angeles.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're not accounting for those time zones,
Mm-hmm.
you might think, oh, wow, everyone's up at midnight browsing our website.
Right.
When really it's just, a normal evening for folks on the other side of the world.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you could really misinterpret your data if you don't account for the time zone.
Exactly. And that's where DateTime.AddZone comes in.
Okay, so it helps us to, I guess, standardize the time zones so we can compare everything accurately.
Exactly. It allows you to shift those timestamps
Okay.
from whatever time zone they were originally recorded in
Mm-hmm.
to a common time zone. So you can do meaningful analysis.
So you're basically putting everyone on the same clock.
Exactly.
Got it.
And that common time zone is typically UTC,
UTC. Okay.
which stands for Coordinated Universal Time.
Right. Right.
And you can think of that as kind of like the prime meridian of time.
Okay.
It's the 0 point from which all other time zones are calculated.
So everything's relative to UTC.
Exactly.
That's helpful.
So let's say you're working with data that has timestamps from servers all over the world.
Okay.
You can use DateTime.AddZone to convert all of those timestamps to UTC.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can analyze them all together without having to worry about what time zone each individual server was in.
That makes it a lot easier to analyze your data. Yeah.
Exactly. And it also makes it a lot easier to share your data with others.
Oh, okay. How so?
Because if you're sharing data that's already been converted to UTC,
Right.
then whoever you're sharing it with doesn't need to know what time zone it was originally recorded in.
Okay, so it removes that ambiguity.
Exactly. It makes your data much more portable and much more reliable.
I see. That's really helpful.
So, we've talked about how DateTime.AddZone can be used to standardize time zones for analysis.
Yeah.
But it can also be used for other things, like converting data to your local time zone for easier viewing,
Oh, okay.
or preparing data for applications that require time zone aware
Mm-hmm.
timestamps.
Right. Right.
So it's a really versatile function that can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
So it's really not just about this formula. It's about thinking about time zones in general when you're working with data.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook,
Yeah, it's easy to forget about.
especially when you're first starting out with data analysis.
Right.
You're so focused on the data itself that you forget about the context surrounding that data.
Yeah, the time and the location are just as important as the numbers themselves.
Exactly.
I'm glad we did this deep dive. I feel like I understand time zones a lot better now.
Yeah, me too. And hopefully our listeners are feeling the same way. As always, I encourage you to keep exploring.
Ooh.
There's so much more to learn about Power Query and data analysis in general.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating field.
So keep diving in and keep asking questions, and you'll be amazed at what you can discover.
I couldn't agree more.
And until next time, happy analyzing.